Before we jump in, can I ask you for a tiny favor? I promise it's easier than finding a parking spot at Trader Joe's on a Saturday. If you've been listening and enjoying these conversations, would you pretty please hit that subscribe button? Even Mel Robbins, who already has a bazillion subscribers, still asks people to subscribe to her podcast, and I love that about her. She doesn't just tell people what helps, she actually models it herself. Doesn't she often say, if you don't ask, you don't get? So I'm taking her lead. Subscribing helps more people find our show. It supports the work we're doing and makes sure you never miss an episode that we pour our hearts into. It's totally free. It takes 1 second and it means a lot. Okay? Did you do it? Thank you. Now let's get into it. Before we dive into today's episode, we would love to take a moment to thank our amazing guests who joined us for our first inaugural season. We could not have done this without you. And for those of you listening and watching, if you have not seen any of our episodes yet, please take a look. They're all must-sees and amazing folks. Season 1 has been about self-awareness, connection, courage, and the ripple effect each of us creates every day. I want to take you back to one of the conversations that sparked a major theme for us this season, the idea that we bring the weather. It's become a mantra and a strong reminder that how we show up shapes the climate around us at work, at home, and in the moments that matter most. It's a powerful moment and the perfect setup for our season finale.
And just to connect to the conversation we had with Rashmir, she also talked about, which connects to relationships, the emphasis on doing rather than being in the workplace.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like that is sort of a very key sort of driver in workplaces, and also a driver, and I don't want to take us too off topic, but a driver in the way that artificial intelligence is being contextualized and utilized in the workplace, right? So all of that ties back to your comment about the importance of relationships, because if there's no focus on the being, then there's no space really or value given to the development of relationships. And even though there's a lot of talk about the importance of trust and psychological safety in organizations, I don't really think that the systems, because that was another kind of pattern and theme, the systems at work are really set up to make space for that. People are always talking, I'm so crazy busy, running from meeting to meeting. So reflection, time for space, time to develop those relationships, time to really think about how you're showing up. And the ripple effect that you're having, which goes to our conversation with Chris, is, I think, undervalued, generally speaking.
Yeah. Chris said that one comment where he said, like, you are the pebble, you create ripples wherever you go. And it reminded me of in conversations with teams of leaders. I was in one just last week, and one of the realizations that the team had is that we bring the weather. Like we create what the environment's going to be like for everyone else. And that made me think of Chris's comment of you are the pebble. And I think I think sometimes, Naomi, to build off on what you're saying, in this culture that we have of wanting to be really results focused, I sometimes wonder if we end up going to a place where we think it's either or. We're either getting results or we're going to spend time on building relationships and connections. When in fact, it's really about how do we do both.
If that resonated with you, and I hope it did, you're in the right place. We're unpacking the lessons, surprises, and breakthroughs that shaped our first season and how the power of pausing and reflecting can unlock more courage, clarity, and connection in your work and life. So don't go anywhere. The conversation starts now. I'm Lorin Mask. Please join me and my best friends at work, Naomi Lippin and Mel Boyd Brown, where we invite experts to talk about work, life, and leadership and how to do them better. Hello. How are you guys?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. How are you, Naomi?
Good. I'm feeling pretty good this morning. Yeah,
Oh, that's awesome. You know, the reason I'm only okay is remember, Naomi, I used to joke around and I used to say, I can't wait to miss my kids because they're driving me crazy. They were at home, teenagers, yada, 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 right? Well, I still have one at home, right? As you guys know, the two girls are gone at college, and Morgan didn't even come home for the summer that much, because she was working. And I'm like, I miss them.
yeah,
Mm, yeah.
yeah,
I miss
yeah.
them. 'Cause my husband and I were just having a little chat this morning during breakfast about our middle, who's of course just a freshman. And so it's all the excitement of like, ooh, what's going on with her? And everything. And of course, when we call them, they miss the cat. How's Chungus? How's Chungus?
Maybe that's code for parents
Yeah.
because they can't say that they miss their parents. It's so they say they miss the cat.
I like how Naomi's thinking about it.
And all I'm thinking is, no, I think they miss the cat. Oh, but it's all right. I think the cat misses them. Oh my gosh, she's so needy. She's like, she's a pretty independent cat, not much of a lap cat, and doesn't really like being picked up. But, Carrington, we call her Carrington the cat abuser because she would just manhandle the cat all the time and make the cat do things that cats don't normally do. And I guess she's missing her abuser. We always say that Chungus will have the Stockholm effect because she's missing her captor.
I'm assuming it's gentle abusing that you're like teasing.
Yeah, she'll just hold the cat too long, right? The cat's going, okay, this is long enough. I'm done. But other than that, I'm doing really well. I'm excited about today. This is a little crazy. Like we've had a whole season of episodes of shows, and we have decided to do something different today, right? And kind of take a little reflection time, take a little pause and reflect back on some of the things that we've been doing. How do you guys want to start today? Do you want to go episode by episode, or do you want to just talk about things that really resonated with us off the top of our head? What would you guys like to do with that?
Well, first
Naomi,
thing I want to, oh,
no, I was just going to say, Naomi, what do you want to do? So go ahead.
uh, well, the first thing I want to say is that this morning I was just looking at our guest Rashmir's transcript again. And Mel, you said something that I think connects to what we're talking about, which is that reflection is a meta skill,
Mhm.
and that you often uh, attempt to get leaders to see it that way and to incorporate that activity or that action really to elevate that as a leadership skill. And so it just connected to me in terms of what we're talking about today. At the end of a year, taking time out to really kind of think back on and consolidate kinds of patterns perhaps that we've seen that we think might be really cool to talk about and to share with our listeners.
I like that, Naomi. I like that idea too. Uh, I've been doing some learnings lately around, team coaching and team dynamics. Even though I've been doing it for, 20 something years, it's still nice to go back and do some continuing education, around that. And a group of us were talking about the fact that, a lot of us don't take time to do reflection and a look back. And so when we're kind of quote unquote forced to, it's kind of a good thing. Because I know for me, when I'm doing my learnings, everyone has learning, a lot of people promote learning journals and things like that. And I'm never really very good about doing that unless someone makes me eat my vegetables. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we're doing
Mm-hmm.
that today. And I like that thought. Meta skill. I like that. I like that. I've
Yeah.
forgotten she said something like that. Yeah.
Well, no, no, that's all credit to Mel. Mel said that.
Oh. Mm.
Mel said that. Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. In response to a thread of conversation
Awesome.
in that episode. So I'm interested in kind of we could go episode by episode, but I'm a little bit more interested in taking more of a Eagles viewpoint, if you will, perspective,
Sure.
if you
Yeah.
all are into that.
Let's go
Yeah,
for it.
that would be my preference too, Naomi.
All
Yeah. Like
right. Who wants
what
to?
are the threads and the themes that we saw connecting across them?
All right. Who wants to get started?
Well, so something that jumped out for me as
Mhm.
I was went back and looked at the transcripts last night. And there were two things that kind of jumped out for me. One is around relationships and and the role it actually popped out first in Jen Nash's session that we did with her, and then I went back to
Mhm.
the other transcripts to think about relationships. And it was this idea that, like, how do you transform an organization if you aren't first willing to transform relationships? But kind of that one-to-one connection piece first. And that was really standing out to me because as I went back and looked at everyone else's, we were talking about your relationship with yourself, how well you know yourself, and then how
Mm,
that allows you to be vulnerable with other people, and how that can build trust with other people, this idea of being authentic to yourself. Um, and that how that starts to shape the relationships that you're in. And then that made me connect back to Jen's pieces. And I think I was thinking about that because I've been doing so much work with teams lately and thinking about, like, how do you create transformation at a large scale? And we talk a lot about programs and projects and initiatives and processes, all of which are super important. But there's also that piece of, like, how do we change the relationships between each other as a way of
Mhm.
then also starting to create change in the organization. So that was one thing that was kind of sticking out for me, and it felt like it
Mhm.
fit in the theme of best friends at work.
I think
I
when you bring up Jen Nash, I'm just going to say this one little quick thing and then
Go
on to
ahead.
you, Naomi, because mine's really
Mhm.
short, was one of the things that Jen brought, and you mentioned the word vulnerability, Mel. One of the powerful statements she said was that it's about power with as opposed to power over. And that
Mhm.
phrase really sticks out for me. And I'm like, if you're going to build relationships, power over is not a relationship building thing, right? It's power with. How can we, as Lori Pine would say, one of the phrases that is very famous out there, but she always reminds me of it is, the tides rise all boats. So, Naomi.
Mhm. And just to connect to the conversation we had with Rashmir, she also talked about, which connects to relationships, the emphasis on doing rather than being in the workplace,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like that is sort of a very key sort of driver in workplaces, and also a driver, and I don't want to take us too off topic, but a driver in the way that artificial intelligence is being
Mm,
contextualized and
Mm.
utilized in the workplace, right? So all of that ties back to your comment about the importance of relationships, because if you're not, if there's no focus on the being, then there's no space really or value given to the development of relationships. And even though there's a lot of talk about the importance of trust and psychological safety in organizations, I don't really think that the systems, because that was another kind of pattern and theme, the systems at work are really set up to make space for that. People are always talking, I'm so crazy busy, I'm so crazy busy,
Yeah,
running from meeting to meeting. So reflection, time for space, time to develop those relationships, time to really think about how you're showing up. And um, the ripple effect that you're having, which goes to our conversation with Chris,
yeah.
is, I think, undervalued, generally speaking.
Yeah, yeah. Chris said that one comment where he said, like, you are the pebble, you create ripples wherever you go. And it reminded me of in conversations with, teams of leaders. I was in one just last week. And one of the realizations that the team had is that we bring the weather. Like we create what the environment's going to be like for everyone else. And that made me think of Chris's comment of you are the
Mm.
pebble. And I think
Mhm.
I think sometimes, Naomi, to build off on what you're saying, in this culture that we have of wanting to be really results focused, I sometimes wonder if we end up going to a place where we think it's either or. We're either getting results or we're going to spend time on
Mhm.
building relationships and connections. When in fact, it's really about how do we do both?
Mhm.
Can't not we can't talk about relationships and not mention Adam and
Mm,
loneliness at work as well. And
yeah,
maybe even tying in um uh
Mm.
Antonivia with,
Oh,
finding your voice. So to me,
yeah,
those two are also connected
mm.
because, Adam's, work around loneliness and, just this idea of, the hugs and things like that, it's
Mhm.
really illustrating the fact that we need to make sure that we're finding space for everyone, right? And at the same time allowing everyone to find their voice, but then we go back to what you guys were saying about the self first. At some point we need to take control of our own selves with that voice, but then allowing others that space. But I just think about that whole episode and the statistics that Adam brought around
mm,
the loneliness and the challenges.
So just to take that a step further, Adam also talked about the reframing loneliness as disconnection,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Why an internal feeling of not being connected to others. So disconnection is almost a state of being, right?
Mm,
And so,
yeah,
and he also talked about kind of the importance of having system-wide solutions rather than just individual solutions, which Mim also talked about our very first conversation around well-being. And so
yeah,
those two things are very connected, right? How do you feel when you're at work or even in general in life? And to your point, Mel, and to your point, you're the pebble, right? So if you're feeling disconnected, generally speaking, and you bring that and the workplace just amplifies that, right? Right. So she also talked about and brought a systems perspective on well-being. Again, a lot of the solutions that are proposed in the workplace that have to do with the employees, individual people, are very often individualistic. Let's have see how many steps you can take in the day rather than, oh my God, there's too many meetings. How do we deal with that? Right?
right,
Um,
right, yeah. Oh, and then she mentioned the, I think it was after our airing, it might have been towards the end, and I can't really remember. Because we had such a wonderful conversation with Mim, but her story about how she had a real client that wanted to bring in a
Yeah.
well-being program or wellness program, and they weren't paying them a living salary, that some of their employees were living in cars. I was like, you
Mm.
can't make this stuff up, right? It's just, it's
Mhm.
organizations have to really figure that out. I mean, it is up to us as an individual, but it's up to the organizations because we spend so much time at work. There tends to be a responsibility that needs to be had by organizations that some are doing it and some aren't, you
Mm.
know? I mean, I think
Yeah.
about Lori's story, right? Her drive and then her quest for finding that peace and then, creating her joy model, which is, goes back to, I can only control what's in the sphere of my control. But as you move up the ladder, your sphere of control gets larger.
Yeah. I really like,
And
sorry, Naomi.
no, go ahead. I was just going to connect that to that idea of loneliness because,
Yes.
what's the cliche we hear? It's lonely at the top, right?
True.
So, so that sense of why did did Lori or does does Lori's message resonate with particularly so many women?
Mm,
Because that sense of disconnection is very real and it's not pleasant.
right. Yeah.
Okay, Mel, sorry. Go
That's
right
all
ahead.
right. I was actually that was a beautiful opportunity for me to build on that because I was really intrigued by that reframing that Adam had of that loneliness. Let's reframe it to disconnection, and then this idea that we can still be disconnected in relationship. We can still be in a community at work
Mm,
and not feel like we belong and that we're part of it. And I think you're right. I think Lori's message about choosing joy and finding opportunities for it kind of speaks to that idea of like where you may find agency for yourself.
mhm.
So not to ignore the process and the structural pieces because those are very real. And how might you also create the kind of change that you want or that you feel like you need in that moment?
It's really powerful, Mel, because
Mhm.
something is resonating with like creating our own moments, our own space, our own world. And in some ways we do that. I was watching a really silly movie last night. It's a really silly movie. Um, but there was a really interesting message where there was a boss and a guy who's trying to move up the ladder and he's competing with another woman and there's this rom-com relation thing part to it and the girl, this woman, turns to the guy and says, "Oh, this leader's not good for you." And she's, of course, like this pretend psychic kind of thing, or she is a psychic. I don't know what it is, but it's all silly. So it's all in tongue in cheek. But he, he ends up, leaving his job, and he realizes that this isn't right for me. So that was where, he was in a space, and he did what was in the sphere of his control to say, this isn't right for me. This isn't what I want. And I think people are scared to make that leap. And you know who made that leap was Kelly,
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
Kelly made that leap really
as
big.
well. Lori and Kelly, right? To some extent, they both made choices to say, I got to get out.
Yeah. And choices that for Kelly were in a really different direction career-wise, like following a dream and a path.
A
Um,
dream she'd had
Mhm.
for a long time, right?
Dream for a long time and deciding that it's now or never, which is such courage, like
Ah,
such courage in
in your
play.
mid 50s to sit there and go, peace out. I'm gonna cut my salary and by a quarter on purpose.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
know, how brave.
Mhm.
And she said that. Oh my gosh, where's my notes for her? She said something about, oh yeah, just don't freak out. Like she was saying to herself, don't freak out.
Mhm.
But
Well, I do think all of that, everything, it's a yes and for me.
Mhm.
You know, I think part of this too, I mean, and I really kudos to Kelly and Lori, and you also, they were in a place where they could do that because Kelly talked about she had the support of her
Yes. Yep.
husband,
And Lori
right?
too. Right. Yeah.
And Lori, and so. I don't want to dismiss or disregard,
No.
that they were in a position to be able, like a little bit of well, a position of privilege to be able to do that, which not everyone is. That said, what I do think is that it is possible to find some things that you love in anything that, in almost anything that you do. Because I've had that experience in my life when I was laid off after 9/11, and I had several different part-time jobs. And one of them was working in retail at the Nike factory outlet, right? Nothing to do with anything that I had been doing. And I found there were little pieces of things that I found that I loved about that job, right? Helping people find exactly what worked for them, right? So was it a job that I loved? No, it was a job out of necessity. Mm, But within that, I could find certain things that I loved, which goes to nothing to do with any of the conversations we had, but the concept of red threads that comes from Marcus Buckingham around
Yeah.
finding
Hmm.
those just the things that light you up. Doesn't have, and it's not everything, but if there's a few things that do, and you don't have the freedom to just say, I'm not doing this anymore, there is a way to find yourself.
Yeah, right. I think that I agree. And doesn't he say it's like about a 20 percenter? If you can get 20% a day of your red threads,
Yeah,
then
20%.
you're a little bit ahead of the game as far as maybe, not having as much stress, and having, as Lori would say, a little more joy, in your work.
Hmm
I think,
Mhm.
And that
yeah,
connects back to Mel, to what to what started this part of our conversation, which is sometimes the red threads really can just come from the relationships that you have
Yeah.
at your job, which also connects to to best friends at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I really oh, I love that connection, Naomi, because when you talked about like jobs that we've done that we didn't necessarily love, when I finished my MBA, my first job was in sales and it was in like go through the yellow, I'm dating myself, go through the yellow pages, find your clients, cold call, knock on doors, for businesses, but knock on doors kind of
Mhm.
sales job. And I still say to this moment that it was the hardest and best job I've ever done. It put me so far out of my comfort zone. And I really disliked most parts of the job, to be honest, but I did it for 18 months. What kept me there, the red thread, was the fact that I'm very outcome driven, but I'm also very relational. And so I got a chance, I just focused on that I was going to build relationships with people. I just wanted to make connections with people. And I tried to put the asking for the sales piece, which was so
hmm
uncomfortable for me, at the back. Um, and that ended up being the thing that sustained me over the course of those 18 months was that I focused on that thread of I'm building relationships because I'd like to build relationships with people. And I still was happy to leave the role. I'm not gonna lie. But that was a thread that I needed to find to make it through that period. Because otherwise I think it would have been really, really challenging emotionally and mentally to stay in that job.
yeah. I think what's interesting about that is, my oldest had to do one of those almost like instead of yellow pages, they're handed lists now from marketing companies. And she's had to do all that. And I'm dying to circle back because she's still, even though she did it as an internship, she's still doing it through the fall. When she's done with that job, I'm gonna circle back and see what kept her motivated, and see the difference because I think that's interesting. What I've seen, is that every job is a learning opportunity as well, regardless of what it is. I mean, I have a theater degree, and I mean, I use that all the time in the fact that we had to be organized, I had to lead, we had to, there's all kinds of like tangential things that we learn. And so with Morgan, having to do that cold calling, um, recently she's looking for her internships for next summer, and she's going to circle back. And I said, well, do you want me to reach out to her and stuff? That she goes, no, I'll call her. Well, like, she's going to make phone calls without mom having to prep them. I'm like, wow. Like, I think they gave her some confidence.
Yeah.
Cold calling, right? And confidence, is such an important and I think key part of, we go back to that vulnerability. I think they kind of like balance each other out. You have that vulnerability. And I used to teach my son, what's courage? He goes, being afraid, but moving forward anyway,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Um, Not to change the subject, but there's a couple people we haven't really brought up because they're in a little bit different sphere, and that would be Raja and Kareth.
Mm.
um, and what they really brought as two kind of similar ideals to our organization. Him talking about kind of the invisible disabilities, and then Kareth with her stories, working in radio, working with this white gentleman who had had a little bit of ugh with the media, and she was there to kind of clean up his image a little bit. Very interesting stories for the two of them. What are your thoughts around those?
I really loved I loved for Raja, I loved how he just reframed disability to differently abled, and then talked about the fact that we all have invisible challenges, right? And for me that really spoke to the idea of we never know really what's going on for people outside of what we can see. And so how do we have like compassion and openness, and assume positive intent when we're dealing with people? And and then this idea that for him, his overcoming the fact that he felt shame about his disability, and that he changed his self-talk in his own head and reframed it. I love that as a metaphor for all of us, of that we might have things that feel really difficult for us, and they are difficult, and how might we still find a way to move forward through them and to find our own voice. So that was something I really, really appreciated about what he was sharing. Because I think we all have
Mhm,
those things in our lives, right? That
mhm,
that
mhm.
that create barriers or that hold us back. And how can we move forward from them?
That find your own voice was interesting because although Antonivia didn't really, go around in the same kind of sphere that Raja and Kareth did, one of the most powerful things that I heard out of all the episodes when she says, when we go to work and we don't find our voice, we're just taking hush money. And
Yeah.
I just like, oh, it's like the best quote ever, taking hush money. I was like, wow. But
Mhm,
anyway,
mhm.
what's your thoughts, Naomi, around like Kareth and Raja and their what they brought for our podcast?
Well, with Raja, the things that kind of jumped out at me is his talking about imposter syndrome, which connects to this thread, I think, to some extent throughout many of the conversations we've had, which is the importance of finding your voice, right? Finding your purpose, understanding and being really intentional about living your values, being in alignment with your values, and how you show up at work or how you show up in life. But particularly since we're talking about work, right? How you show up at work. And I also really like, you know, he did talk about imposter syndrome, right? This feeling that you're not enough.
Yeah.
And whose standard are you comparing yourself against,
Mm, yeah.
right? Which goes back in my mind to this idea of systems
Mm.
and kind of the constructs that we tend to compare ourselves against. Oh, well, a CEO, a leader must have these kinds of qualities. And that also connects to our conversation with Rashmir around sort of the masculine, feminine
Oh, right,
polarity,
right, right,
right?
Yeah.
right.
And some of the characteristics around. leadership that are identified and held up as kind of the standards, right? And so I really liked that. And the thing for Kareth that I really loved is, which was really kind of unique to her, is how she elevated humor
Yeah.
as a way to bring people together, as a way to um, kind of break break down people's sort of um, fear, or like I'm not sure I'm going there. And Lorin, not for nothing, but you and I have trained a lot together, and
Hmm.
you are really masterful at that.
Aw.
That's you are. So you would, get people laughing, and you could, we all, everyone has experienced this. You feel a shift in the energy in the room when you're in a big group, and there's someone, and you get people laughing, changes everything. And I know that you will bring this in, and I probably won't say it correctly, but there is some research, right, that says that laughter really opens up our mind to learning as well.
It really does.
It
It really
really,
does.
really does. I saw a guy speak once at a big conference, and he also talked about how play does kind of something similar. So, if you're at an organization that is super serious all the time, they're kind of missing the mark. They're missing that opportunity to have people think more clearly because it's like almost opening up the airways, right? So you can breathe more and take in more oxygen.
Hmm.
Because when things are serious, you're more tense and you're tight and your chest is tight. You're not getting as much oxygen. You're not getting enough oxygen. It's not going to your brain. And I'm not going to start geeking out on that now. Because it'll just go make everyone crazy with all my little like, let's talk about the amygdala. No, the oh my God, my favorite one. But yeah, and there is research that says like for every a negative experience, right, you have to have what is it, three or five like good experiences to counteract that negative experience. So while you're in a tense situation and someone laughs, it's like you got to do more of that to like really elevate. So.
Hmm. Yeah, this also connects to what Lori Pine was talking about in terms of joy, because I
Mm.
really I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to look at my notes,
Oh.
but I really like how she framed joy as a profound and holistic sense of well-being that transcends momentary happiness. So that if we're talking about kind of laughter and sort of that sense of joy, I think bringing that into the workplace can really change the culture.
Yeah.
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 So something else that Kara said that I really appreciated, because I think about it often. Like I often think of that line that if you have a brain, you have bias. Like of course you have some bias, and her normalizing that everybody has bias, and that how can we just normalize that first of all that exists, and then invite people to notice what their biases are and how they might actually reframe them. Because I think sometimes we're so afraid to talk about bias because it's all of a sudden had this negative connotation, and it does. It creates some horrible outcomes, but it means then that no one's talking about their bias. They're not talking about the fact that I don't understand this or I have these assumptions or these beliefs, which means that we can't really challenge them if we're not willing to look at them in a way that feels non-judgmental. And so I appreciated her invitation to be able to have conversations
Mm.
that are non-judgmental with the goal of just deepening understanding. And I think she does that a lot in her work as well.
Hmm. Well, let's just look at her term inversity, right? And
Yeah.
she spent a lot of time talking about the importance of her creating that term to um, include everyone,
Yeah, bring
right?
people together, right?
Bring people together, right? So I do think that that's really, really important, in particular in the times that we're living in right now, where the reaction, Mel, to what you're talking about, in our country, in the United States, is profound. And the lengths to which our government is going to, it's sort of like, so we went from a place of, all of this, it's, surfacing a lot of the systemic issues in our country,
Mhm.
right? And talking a lot of, it's sort of bringing that to the surface. And now it's like erasing.
Yeah.
Just, he's, oh my God, just this whole stuff around museums and taking things away from changing the story around the truth around history.
Mm.
It's remarkable, but I do think in its essence, it is a reaction to people saying, I don't want to deal with that. That I'm not dealing with some things that have happened and continue to happen that are hard to
Yeah.
deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of something that Kara said when she talked about that we often think of risk as physical risk, and yet actually risk also happens in emotional vulnerability and
Mhm.
Totally.
authenticity. And I loved
Mhm.
she said she at one point went back and said like what happens if we could reframe risk? It's a path to growth. So asking ourselves like what would happen if I don't have this conversation or what would happen if I don't try? And it also made me think of Kelly slightly differently, but this idea of courage of asking ourselves like, well, what will happen if we don't do this? We don't engage in this conversation, even though it feels hard,
Mhm.
it feels challenging, and it feels scary to us. And I really appreciated that reframing because it can be easy to see that risk and pull back.
And
S
that connects to something that Antonivia talked about in when she was telling her story, which is, her background is Caribbean, right?
Yeah.
Black Caribbean. And in the theater, there was no space for her,
Hmm.
right?
Like
She
Kareth, her and
didn't,
Kareth were very similar in some ways.
right? They
Yeah.
didn't, well, and she, definitely did not fit any, being Black Caribbean is distinctly different than being African American. And so there was just no space. And so she created her own
Yeah. Yeah.
Caribbean theater company.
She
And so,
took
right, so
control, yeah.
there is that as well. And I think that also connects to Adam because based on his experience, his life experience, he created two companies to help people manage or feel connected, I should say. He created two companies to help people feel connected,
Yeah.
Mm.
right? And so one of the things that and maybe this is, you can tell me if I'm taking too big of a jump and we can take a step back, but one of the things that I wrote down after I read through all of the transcripts is what we do as adults, somehow in some ways connected to our childhood experiences and our process of healing. So how we show up as adults to some extent is really connected to our desire to heal some experiences that we had as children. Because I think about, for example, Adam and how he and Carrot
Mhm.
and Tunisia to some that
Right.
there's
And
some
Raja, right, yeah.
right there's something around the well, we are to some extent the sum of, as we sit here today, we are the product of the sum of our experiences
Right.
in life.
What that makes me think about is, and it goes back to that self-awareness piece of our ability to move forward as leaders, for example, or to find our path starts with first being really clear inside of ourselves about what matters, what motivates us, how our past experiences might be showing up and influencing the choices that we're making now. And and I think we do carry those experiences with us consciously and unconsciously. And when they're conscious, we get to make choices from them. We get to decide how much of those experiences continue to shape us in ways that are positive and how much they're going to shape us in ways that aren't helpful for us as well. But it all starts with that um, with the inner game work of leadership, which is like understanding you, your motivations, your experiences, your values, your things that activate you, things that motivate you. Lorin, you took a
Yeah,
big
you made
breath
me
by saying that.
you made me light bulb ding ding ding. Well, that's making me think you're literally making me think about Phil,
Mhm.
right? She was a creator and she had a specific vision, right? I unfortunately, because of technology reasons, got kicked out of most of that conversation, but I did get to listen to the two of you have a really amazing conversation with Phil and her whole concept of ROT, right? That return on trust and how
Yes.
important that is and how much of a value you could really see the what was valuable to her and values as a leader to kind of create that space. And I think that's
Mhm.
kind of bringing us full circle to the common thread around relationships and, making that space and finding her own voice. And she was like just very powerful.
Hmm. She also made a comment, your network is your net worth.
Yeah, I love that comment.
Relationships, right?
Right? Absolutely. And so, I think, that though that awareness, at least in many places that I worked, was not really valued, right? That awareness of the importance of relationships, the importance of understanding how to manage them um, effectively. So we talk about emotional intelligence, and then I know both of you who have been on the path of studying teams and working with teams more. Um, the gentleman that you both have studied with, talks about moving from emotional intelligence. I believe he uses the word collective intelligence,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, Peter Hawkins.
Yep,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
So moving from, yes, right, intelligence, IQ, to who am I, to kind of almost we Q, like who are we as a
Yep.
team, right? And really focusing on the space between people, because it's the space between people that creates the team,
Yeah.
which therefore creates the organization, because organizations really, if you think about it, are just a collection of groups of people.
Yeah. Well said, Naomi.
Yeah. I like that. I love that. I've forgotten about that we queue. I don't know why. I'm right in the middle of it. It's not even thinking, but I think that that's really important. And so I'm going to make a little bit of a shift here.
Right ahead.
And our we're kind of talking about like what's really resonating with us and what resonated with us and what we found profound and impactful. And of course, we need another 16,000 hours to really to do that. But our listeners, of course, can listen to all the various episodes and they can get more into each of these subjects. But our most watched episode is Kenya Salahuddin with Embracing Conflict.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was just saying
Right?
touched
Why
on
were our
yeah.
listeners really drawn to her episode? Number two was the Wellness Mirage with Mim. She's our number two episode so far. So what do you think's going on with our audience that they're really wanting to see what Kenya has to say?
Is it too obvious an answer just to say that we're living in lots of change and conflict?
Wah, wah. Setting that one up, softball.
Oh
Oh
my
my gosh, like
God.
I think yeah, right? Like even the word embracing conflict, which is really her ideology, right? She's like we've got to step in the mess. We've got to get into that. And it's almost like we've got to utilize all the things from all the episodes, right? Not be disconnected, trust, belonging, not being division, but being inclusive, finding your voice, blah, blah, blah. All that kind of stuff seems to like culminate right there with Kenya and like embracing conflict because that tends to be the hot button, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to add one thing to that, to what you just said, and that is courage,
Courage,
Yeah.
right?
right? Courage and Mel, this connects to what you were talking about. You brought up earlier the how we frame risk, because entering into those kinds of challenging conversation brings up a lot of fear for people, and it takes courage, and also, some for some people, some um, tools for how to approach that. Because again, and this she said this, complexities of conflict are influenced by individual experiences, emotions, and cultural differences. So this
Oh,
ties back to how our experiences in some ways growing up. How was conflict dealt with within our families?
Mm,
For
mm-hmm.
most of
Right,
us,
right, right,
that
right.
wasn't so great, me included.
yep.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
so where do you learn effective, sort of positive, constructive ways to deal with those kinds of situations? And so it takes it takes intentionality, and it takes, I think, a commitment to practice the skills that can help you have those kinds of conversations in better ways. And those skills, we did crucial conversations, but there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of frameworks. It's just a matter of taking them and like anything else, it takes practice, because we don't, I think ourselves, many of us did not grow up learning those skills. We didn't really learn
Mm-hmm.
them in school, and we don't see them um, around us.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And a
Yeah,
little ad Mel, but I know you've got a probably really profound thing to say. This is a tiny one. I'd also like to circle back to Rashmir. And one of the things that she said that was profound was that, come from a place of love, like
yeah.
not romantic love, but a love for beings and for humans. And I think that also helps with embracing conflict, right? Mel.
Well, I was just thinking, I actually agree, first of all, with that point, because it makes me think of the idea of like assume positive intent going in. Like, can you assume that the other person didn't wake up this morning thinking, I can't wait to pick a fight with Lauren? That would be the best part of my day. That's probably not their intention.
Right.
You got to the conflict was not the intention. Some people it might be, but let's assume for a moment that that's not common. And Naomi, I really appreciated you bringing up the past experiences pieces because I think that that is very, very true in terms of how we move through the world, how we understand conflict, how we perceive conflict. And one of the things that I really appreciated about what Kenya said, and I think it calls back to this courage piece that you're both mentioning, is she talked about it being a self-awareness and then to notice your default patterns and then a willingness to try to change your default patterns. Because if you've grown up without great models of conflict resolution, which most of us have, by the way, like most of us
Hmm.
don't like
Yeah.
conflict,
Hmm.
uncomfortable, we feel threatened, like lots of stuff's going on. Um, so it takes courage to go into a conversation where you know there's going to be conflict, and it takes courage to be able to notice that maybe somehow you're contributing to the conflict, that it's not just the other person, but that you have a contribution here that could be changed. That's
Right, right.
courage.
Yeah, right.
Totally, totally. I will say that embracing that mindset, which I did actually learn through the Crucial Conversations model,
Hmm.
changed the primary relationship I have in my life. It
Yeah.
did profoundly, right? Really, instead of sort of the knee-jerk reaction of pointing finger, taking a moment, taking a step back, and really looking at the dynamic and what I needed to own in its creation.
For me, it was the difficult conversations framework, very similar to crucial
Yeah.
conversations, but the
Hmm.
idea of like how can you step back for a moment and think about the facts, and then your identity, like what's happening for you, what might be happening for the other person. And I remember that was given to me when I was early on as an executive, and it blew my mind. Like, what? It changed how I thought about conflict. And it really got me curious when I see conflict about like what's happening inside of me, what's happening with the other person, and then what's happening outside of us. It doesn't mean I get it right, by the way. I think my kids would tell you that I don't get it right. But it was an interesting model similarly of and I think
Mm-hmm.
we need to also learn those models too.
Yeah.
And there's lots of them, but having tools and frameworks to go back to are also really helpful.
I think I agree with you, both of you, about having, there's lots of models, lots of frameworks. Find them, find one that resonates with you, and just really kind of stick to it and dig in. When Naomi and I used to teach crucial conversations, one of the hardest things that people couldn't get there's one of these questions where it's like, what do I want for myself? With these conversations planners, what do I want for myself? And the other question was, what do I want for the other person? And usually it was something like, well, what do I want for the other person? I want them to stop doing things that are making me mad. It's like, no, 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 no. No, no, that's not what you want for the other person. What do you, they want something. You want what they want. Like you need to find out like what that really means is that you want to see them be successful. You want them to not have trouble. You want them to be like that was one of the hardest things. The other thing I think is hard is the stop in a
Mm,
moment because we all know that amygdala, my oh my gotta, right? That just takes over. And I think the, just like unconscious bias, I think that just happens speed of sound or sounds too slow. The speed of light, right? It's so fast. It's kind of the same thing. It happens without us even knowing it, where we see something, we react, and taking that time in that reaction moment, and that takes a lot of practice and willingness. And
yeah.
willingness. A lot of people don't. Oh my gosh, we could talk forever on this stuff.
I think that goes back to Naomi, like in the very beginning when we talked about reflection as a meta skill. Like I see that
Mhm.
connection there, that as we strengthen our ability to notice, and I often will say to clients, like, I'm not talking about an hour meditation here. Like this could be a 30-second pause or a 2-minute pause,
Right.
walk into a meeting. These can be quick but focused moments when we just slow down and we get intentional about what it is we're thinking about, what we want, what we're noticing,
Yeah.
what we're observing. And that can also be helpful for us when we think about conflict. Oftentimes with clients, we'll start with like, what is it that you're experiencing in your body just before it happens, so that they can start to notice the physiological responses first as cues of
Hmm.
like, oh, you know, my
Yeah.
breathing,
So
increasing,
that
I,
they
my
can notice
I'm
them in the
so
future.
thank you for bringing that up, Mel, because all of this really does start actually, I think, in our bodies. Before it
yeah,
hits our brain, it starts in our bodies. And so if we can begin to notice and understand our patterns, because each of us is probably a little bit different in
Hmm.
how sort of uncomfortable or unsafe situations, how they affect us. Before it hits our brain, we can notice, oh, how am I sitting? Or my heart rate is beginning to get, go a little faster, or I'm moving my hands, I'm wringing my hands a little bit, or any of those things that, and then, really taking that pause, right? That's Viktor Frankl's, famous
yeah,
cliches, right? It's that millisecond, taking that millisecond is the difference between reacting and responding. Because responding is more of an intentional action. Reacting is the amygdala, boom,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
And
Right.
most of the time when we react, it doesn't end up well.
Does
Which
not.
is not to say that when we respond, it always ends up well, because it doesn't.
It doesn't either.
And
Right?
speaking of ending up well, ending up well, we've had a wonderful conversation. I think we could talk for hours, and I think we will definitely for our listeners be circling back again and having some look backs for our future episodes. I definitely recommend, for all our listeners, please check out all these different episodes. I think, especially, look at those titles and see what's really resonating for you right now. And you might get some nice pearls in there. We've had some amazing guest speakers on, and they've just have blown me away. Um, what's next for us? Like, what's our future looking like? What do you think? What's going on?
I think we've talked, Naomi brought this up at our last session, and I'm deeply intrigued by it. Like, talking a little bit about AI and what it means
Mm,
in the workplace, in leadership, and how we work. It feels like we're at a similar transition stage, like from um from how we think about work that we've gone through these every 50 or 100 years, and it feels like we're at another one. So I'm deeply curious about maybe us tackling that from a couple of different perspectives.
Yep.
I
About
like that. It made me think
Yeah.
of Chris Rollins, and he actually mentioned and touched on it about, not making AI barriers to human connection, but facilitators of human connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I would love that if we could spend some time in sort of, if you will, our season two, really looking at AI and it's see, I'm gonna go out on a limb, Mel, and say it's not a transition. This is a quantum leap. This is a
Mm,
quantum leap into it's like when it's jumping off the cliff and not knowing how you're going to land because this is uncharted territory completely, and things are moving very, very quickly. In
And
fact, the other day I read something about um, AI. I can't remember which company it was, being able to people being able to communicate without speaking.
oh, that's cool.
which they kind of already
Okay,
do.
maybe not.
Some people will say.
Yes, and I mean, this is the interesting thing, right?
Right.
It is both very new and also ancient,
Right.
Yeah.
ancient,
Yeah.
And it's
right?
like
Ancient,
coming together, right? Yeah.
how people there are stories people used to be able to communicate with other than other human beings, and how people before there was language, people communicated. How did they communicate, right? So it's very interesting.
I
So
agree.
yes, there's a lot. I think that there's a lot to explore. And I shared with you guys that I just attended a
Mm,
women powered AI conference at MIT. And that was, fascinating. And it would be great, I think, to have some of the entrepreneurs who have started companies, AI
Mm-hmm.
companies in different ways, perhaps join us and talk about, their perspective and why they're moving into that space and how they're moving into that space and how are they keeping the human centeredness of it alive.
yeah.
And I think that is an amazing place to end our reflection time, right? That we can, I mean, our goal here is, that human-centered idea. And there's so much work being done in that sphere. And I think how do we connect engagement, relationships, conflict, you know, belonging, well-being, all of those, joy, courage, uh, disconnect, all that kind of stuff. And how can AI help us as opposed to being afraid? How can we embrace it, right? And say it's power with as opposed to power over. Thanks, Jen
Yeah.
Nash.
Nash. Mm.
I've had a wonderful, wonderful hour with you guys. It was a great time to reflect. I appreciate you guys being here and being my best friends at work.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I really value and appreciate our connection,
Yeah.
and really glad. Thank you, Lorin, for initiating this project, if you will, or this. I don't know what to call it, but it's it's
Yeah,
been I've really learned a lot, both from our guests and also from how we've emerged as a collective, if you will,
yeah,
podcast collective. It's unusual to have three people doing podcasts
Yeah.
together. And so I think the learning for me is on so many levels. So thank you.
I agree.
Yeah, I echo that. I would not have done this. I would never have thought about a podcast ever in a million years. Um, and I have so enjoyed it, and I've done it because of the two of you, and I've learned so much. So thank you.
Well, you guys have helped motivate me because, my whole personal journey is when I learn something great, I want to share it with the world. And I'm like, how can you share? Well, let's see what's a way that we can do that. So I'm excited about new guests that we're going to be bringing on and more learning and more sharing and more connections. So everyone, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
have a wonderful rest of the day, rest of the week. And I look forward to our next guest.
Thank
All right, bye
you.
guys.